the brilliant international editor of Talk, Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome, Isabel.
Good evening, Kev. How are you doing?
Well, we're busy and we've got a lot to talk about, as I say. Before we start, let's have a little look at Nigel Farage's take on this absolute scandal surrounding all these Afghan migrants who have been secretly shipped into this country under the cover of a stupid celebrity-style superinjunction. A government going to the courts to keep secrets from the electorate, from the people who elected it. That is disgusting and disgraceful. Here's Nigel Farage's take.
Amongst the number that have come are convicted sex offenders. I am not, I promise you, making any of this up. And the total cost of the operation has been a staggering £7 billion. Of those that came, none of them were included in the immigration figures. There has been a total veil of secrecy put upon this by the last Conservative government and frankly carried on until now by the current Labour government. The numbers are off the charts. The cost is beyond comprehension. And the threat to women walking the streets of this country, frankly, is incalculable. I can't think of a better example of the total incompetence, dishonesty, and genuine lack of understanding what the priorities of a British government are than this Afghan scandal.
Well, I couldn't agree more. This is just shocking, absolutely shocking. So this injunction was taken, super injunction. So if you take an injunction out to keep a story quiet, people are at least allowed to know that there is an injunction in place to keep that story quiet. If you take a super injunction out, they're not even allowed to know of the existence of the injunction. That's what the government has been operating under since August 2023. And regular flights have been coming in from Pakistan full of these Afghanistan migrants. Now, there's so many questions to ask here. My first question, I guess, to you, Isabel, why do you think that the bungling official at the Ministry of Defence who accidentally shared this list of 100,000 Afghans who are supposed to be involved in helping Britain during the Afghanistan war, he accidentally made that public, shared it. Why is he still working at the Ministry of Defence? What do you have to do in this country to get fired these days?
Well, it's almost impossible, isn't it, to get fired from the civil service? You just get moved to another department, quite often promoted. It's exactly the same in the NHS. You know, you run a failing NHS hospital trust. It doesn't mean that you're then disqualified from running another one. You just get moved to a different role. I mean, in a sense, yes, it's an important question, but there are so many wider questions than that.
I'm coming to them, don't worry.
It's hard to know where to begin, isn't it? You know, but let's just begin with a general observation about the absolutely breathtaking attitude that this demonstrates on the part of political leadership towards the people to whom they serve, for whom they serve. You know, servants of the people is what an elected government is. You know, they are not there for any other reason than that they have been elected to be there to do what the British people have asked them to do. And first and foremost, their duty is to the British people, not to Afghans. Of course, we had some responsibilities, but first and foremost, British people must come ahead of all of that. And it beggars belief that in their absolute fixation with being honourable towards anyone and everyone who might somehow have been associated with the cause that we ran away from, the British people came last. We were kept in the dark because we were not considered grown up enough to be told the truth. And you know, the ramifications of this go so deep, don't they?
They really do. We need a law right now. Never again must the government be allowed to use the courts to seek secrecy to keep secrets from the people who elect these governments. This has to stop. And that attitude you're talking about, this we're in charge, you know, with the politicians, you know, you're just the little people, we'll make decisions and we won't burden you with them. Let's have a look at a couple of examples of this attitude. First of all, it is the then Defence Secretary at the time, the Defence Secretary who sought this super injunction, Ben Wallace. Take it away, Ben.
I took a decision that the most important priority was to protect those people who could have been or were exposed by this data leak in Afghanistan, living amongst the Taliban, who had no regard for their safety or indeed potentially could torture them or murder them. That was my priority. Now, I felt, and people can criticize me all they like on that, and they have a right to that opinion, that if we weren't given time and space to deal with this leak, find out whether the Taliban had it, and to date, there's no actual evidence they have now got it, and John Healey quite rightly has done a review subsequently, and to then start the process of getting out of that country those people who would have been put at risk by that data. And that was my priority.
Yeah, that was your decision, Ben. It was entirely wrong. It was a wrong decision, so stop being so damn proud of it. Here's the now Lord Michael Gove, who was earlier on Julia Hartley-Brewer's show on Talk here. He, of course, was one of the senior ministers who was in on this secret that was scandalously, outrageously kept from the British people. So take it away, Lord Gove.
Were you, as a senior figure in government, close to both Boris Johnson, previous Prime Minister, and Rishi Sunak, were you aware of this super injunction?
Yes.
And when were you first told about it?
I was told about it in the final year in which I was in government, because my responsibility as the Levelling Up Secretary of State, responsible for housing and for local government, was to ensure that we could do everything that we could in order to ensure that those Afghan refugees who were in a position where they could move from Afghanistan or from adjacent countries into the United Kingdom were appropriately housed.
You see, what this is, Isabel, this is all the sort of be kind, oh, you know, all these people who helped us in the Afghanistan was our responsibility. We've screwed up here. Now, here's the deal. That idiot who leaked this list, you know, he should have been sacked. But that was, you know, an egregious error that did leave us with a situation. You know, that I utterly accept we have responsibility to the Afghanis, the interpreters, the translators, the people who genuinely helped the Brits during the Afghanistan war. A friend of mine was an officer out there. I phoned him this morning. I said, look, this 100,000 figure, did you have 100,000 people? I mean, I realise what you're talking about is probably about 25,000 alleged collaborators and their families. I said, do you have like 30,000 interpreters, translators? He said, I think just about throughout the time I was there, I can remember about 100 Afghanis working for us. 100. So this list, you know, is actually the list of Afghanis, many of them chancers, opportunists, who took the opportunity to say, right, I helped you, please can you take me to Britain? So most of these people on this list are just opportunists, chancers, liars. So Ben Wallace, Michael Gove, but Ben Wallace in particular, he's abrogating his duty. His duty was not to say everybody on this list must come back. His job was to go through that list and find out the people that we really owed a responsibility to and reject the rest. Government is not easy. He made the easy decision that was incredibly wrong and has left us in an absolute mess. The ramifications of this secret air list are shocking. They're shocking. We're going to go into some of that. But do you see what I mean? You know, first of all, Ben Wallace should have gone through that list. And secondly, this sort of superior attitude, I took the lives at risk. Well, what about, as Nigel Farage pointed out, that loads of these Afghanis have been imported into this country and we don't know anything about. We do know that several of them are convicted sex offenders who were previously rejected, quite rightly, but when they were on the death list, of course, we have to let them back in. We also know that at least one of them said, I've got the list, and if you don't put me on that plane, I'm going to tell the Taliban. So these are the kind of people they were letting in. So what they've actually done, and I'm sure most of these Afghanis have been let in are perfectly decent people, but what they've done is they've let in thousands and thousands and thousands of foreigners about whom we know nothing, some of whom could pose a serious threat to the safety of British citizens. So Ben Wallace, Michael Gove, all of that lot can go to hell with this decision. It's disgusting.
Well, it's the same attitude, isn't it, towards those that are pouring across the channel every day. It's welcome them in first and ask questions later. And you've got to wonder why they needed a list of a kind of long list of 100,000 applicants. Surely we already knew who our translators were and who the core people were that were helping us, and they should have been on a short list, and that was all that was actually required. I understand why Ben Wallace took the decision he did in the very short term. It's a bit like COVID.
I'll give him that. Okay, yeah.
It's a bit like COVID, isn't it? You know, initially you can forgive the initial lockdown for the first few weeks while everyone worked out how serious is this, what do we actually need to do about it? But it's not forgivable in the same way that lockdowns weren't, to carry it on for month after month, year after year in the case of this, and to continue trying to extend it. I mean, you know, on this programme, we barely ever have a good word to say about the judges, but in this case, the judge was actually playing an absolute blinder, representing the interests of the public, saying, this beggars belief. You know, he sort of said, am I going bonkers? Am I reading this right? Are you seriously still trying to cover this thing up? And another point I would make is there was never any need whatsoever for the UK to take all of these people. Pakistan, for example, might well have been very happy to accept large numbers of those who perhaps had borderline cases of merit to get out of Afghanistan. I'm pretty sure that a cost of a fraction of 7 billion, we could have persuaded neighbouring countries to take some of those applicants for us, and then we would see, you know, whether they really definitely did need to be leaving Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, the thing is, this is what this has amounted to for the past 2 years is a sort of British secret people smuggling operation, because what we've been doing is secreting these Afghanis on this death list out of Afghanistan into Pakistan, presumably by road, presumably across the Khyber Pass or something like that, getting them into Pakistan, and then from there flying them in unmarked transporter planes to Brize Norton, the RAF centre here, and then dispersing them around the country. Numbers seem to vary, but it looks as if something like 19,000 have come already, and apparently the total number earmarked for arrival here is about 23,900, 24,000 if you like, which again is one more, we've got to go to break, but one more question is this. So John Healey, to some extent, to his credit, lifted this super injunction and said the people ought to know about this. Now, if it was such an imperative for Ben Wallace and the Tory government to keep this totally secret because of the safety of these poor Afghanis, why is it not such an imperative for John Healey? Because he's just lifted the veil and there's still about 4,000 migrants to come. So doesn't he care about them? Don't they matter as much as the others?
Well, they don't matter as much as the British people, I'm afraid. They're obviously pretty low down on the list, otherwise they would have been whisked here a long time ago. You listen to Michael Gove talking about how he was the levelling up secretary, and it just makes a nonsense of that whole notion, that someone was employed to level up, which means to help poorer communities improve and to create better standards of living in the poorer parts of the UK, you're not going to do that by swamping poorer areas, because that's where many of these people will have been relocated, with a whole bunch of people that can't speak a word of English, because they weren't all translators, were they, including all their families, and are going to be on benefits for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, well, we're going to cover that in a second. There are so many scandalous elements to this, but somebody worked out that if all these Afghani migrants that we've been secreting into the country really were interpreters, that would mean that every British squaddy during the Afghanistan war would have personally had 73 interpreters. This is ridiculous. What Wallace's job was to narrow it down and find the people who we really owed responsibility to, who we really owed a debt to, because it wasn't 100,000. This is a joke, a sick joke. We'll go to break now, and when we come back, we'll talk about the connection between these Afghanis who've been infiltrated into our country and last summer's riots.